I never imagined I'd see blood pooling under my father's arm, or that it would be my wife holding the knife. Her hands were shaking so hard the blade clattered to the floor, the metallic clang echoing through the kitchen. My mother screamed. The world seemed to shrink to the size of that room. The smell of iron, the thud of my heart, the disbelief pressing behind my eyes. "Michael," she whispered, voice cracking. "I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to." I couldn't move. My legs went cold. My throat locked. My dad, my strong, quiet, church every Sunday dad, lay gasping, his face twisted with pain and confusion. He tried to speak, but only a gurgle came out. The police sirens in the distance sounded like a cool soundtrack to a nightmare I couldn't wake from. My wife dropped to her knees beside him, crying, "I loved you. I didn't mean for it to happen like this." And that's when I realized what she meant, what it was, because somewhere deep in my mind, pieces started clicking together. The late-night texts, the strange tension at family dinners, the way my dad couldn't look me in the eye anymore. I thought I was losing my mind. Turns out, I was just losing everything else instead. But how did we get here? How does a family that prays together every Sunday end up like this? With betrayal, secrets, and blood on the kitchen floor. Let me take you back, because if I don't tell this right, no one will ever believe how fast love can turn into horror. It started 3 years earlier, in the little town of Brookhaven, Georgia. My name's Michael Adams, and for the most part, life back then was peaceful, simple even. I was 29, working as an auto mechanic, married to the woman I thought was my forever, Sarah. Sarah wasn't the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room, but she had this quiet way of making everyone feel seen. She volunteered at a library, baked cookies for the neighbors, and made our little rented house feel like home. My parents, Frank and Linda, lived 15 minutes away. Dad was a retired police officer, old school, tough, but kind underneath the rough edges. Mom was the type who would bring soup to anyone sick, even if she barely knew them. We weren't perfect, but we were close. At least, that's what I thought. Our story really began the day my dad had his second heart attack. I remember sitting beside him in the hospital room, the steady beep of machines filling the silence. Sarah sat on his other side, holding his hand. She told him everything would be okay, her voice gentle, almost tender in a way that made me proud of her compassion. Dad looked weak for the first time in my life. He managed a small smile, squeezed her hand back, and said, "You're a good girl, Sarah. Don't let him work too hard, okay?" She laughed softly, and that was that. Or so I thought. After he came home from the hospital, Sarah insisted on helping my mom take care of him while he recovered. "Linda's exhausted," she said one morning, packing soup into containers. "Your dad shouldn't be alone during the day." I didn't think much of it. I was grateful, actually. That was Sarah, selfless, dependable, always doing the right thing. But then little things started to feel off. She'd come home later than usual. When I asked, she'd say, "Your mom wanted me to stay for dinner," or "Your dad needed help with his medication." Her phone would buzz late at night, and she'd flip it over fast, smiling awkwardly. I told myself not to be paranoid, that love means trust, but the thought wouldn't go away. Then came the day she started wearing perfume again, the one she used to wear when we first met, sweet and floral, the kind that lingers even after she's gone. I remember standing in the garage, wiping grease from my hands, when Dad pulled up in his truck. I expected him to wave or ask about the car I was working on. Instead, he barely looked at me. "Hey, Dad," I said, trying to catch his eye. He grunted, muttered something about needing to fix his headlights, and left. That night, Sarah didn't come home until 9:30. Said she was helping Mom clean the house. But when I called Mom to thank her for dinner the next day, she said, "Oh, honey, I haven't seen Sarah all week. Everything okay?" That was the first crack. I didn't confront Sarah right away. Instead, I started paying attention to her tone, her body language, the little things. She started avoiding eye contact when my dad's name came up. She started keeping her phone on silent. One night, when she fell asleep, I saw a message flash across the screen. "Same time tomorrow." No name. Just that. My stomach dropped. I wanted to believe it was nothing, maybe a friend from work. But deep down, I already knew. Still, I loved her. So I told myself I was imagining things. Weeks turned into months. Dad's health improved, and Sarah stopped going over as often. Things went back to normal, or at least looked that way, until my mom's birthday. We were all at my parents' house, balloons, cake, music. Dad seemed happy, laughing harder than I'd seen in years. Sarah brought her famous lemon pie. Everyone said it was the best she'd ever made. But then I caught a look, just a split second, between her and my dad across the room. It was the kind of look you can't mistake. Not between family, not ever. And in that instant, something inside me broke. I tried to tell myself I misunderstood. Maybe I was just tired, jealous, paranoid. But when she leaned in to whisper something to him, and he smiled that same crooked smile I used to get, I felt the floor tilt beneath me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the last year. Every late night, every secret text, every awkward silence. I told myself I needed proof, real proof, before I said anything. So I started watching. I installed a small camera in Dad's garage, the one he used for his woodworking projects. I told myself it was for security, since there had been break-ins nearby. But really, it was for the truth. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Just Dad sanding wood, Sarah dropping off lunch occasionally. Then one night, around 8 p.m., I saw it. The footage showed Sarah arriving after dark. She didn't knock. She just walked in. Dad was already there. They talked for a few minutes. Then she reached up, touched his cheek, and kissed him. My heart stopped. I shut the laptop, breathing so hard it hurt. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But instead, I just sat there in silence. The next morning, I went to work like nothing happened. Smiled at customers. Changed oil. Fixed engines. Pretended my world wasn't falling apart. When I got home, Sarah was making dinner, humming softly. She looked up and said, "Hey, babe, you okay?" I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, just tired. Inside, I was dying. I didn't confront her that night. Or the next. Because I didn't know what to do. Confronting her meant destroying my family. Confronting Dad meant destroying my mom's. And I couldn't do that. Not yet. But something had to give. And it did. The night of the storm. Thunder shook the windows. Rain hammered the roof. I came home early, drenched and exhausted. The house was dark, except for the faint light in the kitchen. Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway. Something told me to go to my parents' house. I don't know why. Maybe instinct. Maybe anger. When I pulled up, I saw both their cars there. My heart sank. I walked up to the door. It was unlocked. What happened next? I'll never forget. I stepped inside and heard shouting. Then a crash. Then a scream. And when I ran into the kitchen, I saw it, the scene that would change everything. My father lying on the floor. My wife holding the knife. Blood everywhere. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "Michael, he was going to tell her everything." The sirens grew louder outside, and I just stood there, between the woman I loved and the father I'd worshipped, not knowing which one had just destroyed my life. Looking back now, I don't even know how I made it through that night without completely losing my mind. I mean, blood on the floor, the woman I loved standing over my father with a knife in her hand. It was the kind of thing that could destroy anyone. And yet somehow, I got into my car and waited for the police to arrive, shaking so badly I thought I might collapse. The first officer through the door barely gave me a glance before he started barking orders. "Everyone stay where you are. Hands visible." My mother was sobbing on the couch, muttering something about prayers and forgiveness, and Sarah just sat there, still holding the knife loosely, her eyes wild and desperate. I tried to speak, to explain, but my voice cracked. All I could manage was, it was an accident. I think she didn't mean it. The officer's gaze shifted to Sarah, narrowing. "Sir," he said to me, "step aside. We need to secure the scene." I did as I was told, frozen, my stomach twisting. I watched as they carefully moved Sarah out of the kitchen and cuffed her. She didn't resist. She just kept whispering, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. I thought I'd feel relief, that seeing her taken away would ease a tension in my chest. But I didn't. Instead, an emptiness spread through me, cold and heavy, and a strange thought crept in, asterisk something doesn't add up, asterisk. Because if this was really just a tragic accident, why did she look so calm when I found her? Why did my father's expression in that instant seem almost resigned? I followed them to the police car, hoping for some answers, but the only thing I got was silence. The detective assigned to the case, a woman named asterisk asterisk Detective Ramirez asterisk asterisk, didn't speak much at first. She just observed me, her eyes sharp, and then finally said, Mr. Adams, we'll need a full statement. Everything you know. Start from the beginning. And that's when it hit me. Starting from the beginning meant reliving everything. Every late night, every strange text, every moment I'd ignored because I asterisk didn't want to believe it. Asterisk. I sat in the police station hours later, retelling my life, not just the last week, but the last 3 years. I explained my dad's heart attack, Sarah's constant visits, the little moments that now screamed like sirens in my memory. I told him about the message I'd seen flashing on her phone. Asterisk, same time tomorrow. Asterisk. Detective Ramirez listened quietly, taking notes. But every so often, she would pause and ask questions that made my stomach churn. Are you sure it's your wife in that footage? She asked, calm but precise. Could someone else have been there? I laughed, or maybe it was a bit to chuckle. No, I said, it's Sarah. I saw it myself. But her next words made me freeze. And yet, she said slowly, there are inconsistencies in the story we're getting from her. Witness statements, phone records, they don't all line up. I remember thinking at that moment, asterisk, what do you mean inconsistencies? Asterisk, I had thought this was simple. Wife kills father, tragic accident, end of story. But Detective Ramirez didn't seem satisfied with simple. She said, we'll need to investigate every angle. That includes family members, friends, even people who had access to the house that night. It was like a hammer to my chest. People I trusted, people I thought were innocent. Suddenly, nothing was safe. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every scene in my mind. And then I remembered something, a tiny, insignificant detail from the kitchen earlier. A glass I'd left on the counter that had fingerprints. Not Sarah's, not mine, someone else's. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe the stress had made me paranoid. But the thought kept gnawing at me. Asterisk, someone else was there. Asterisk. The next morning, the detective called me back to the station. Sarah had given her statement, a version of events that didn't match mine. She claimed my father had fallen, that she had tried to stop him from hitting his head. She said it was an accident, but the tone of her voice, even over the phone, didn't match panic or fear. It was rehearsed. Detective Ramirez looked at me when she hung up. I don't believe her, she said flatly. Something is very wrong here, and we're going to find out what. Over the next week, my life became a blur of interviews, phone records, and surveillance footage. I watched as police examined every inch of my house and my parents' home. They questioned neighbors, co-workers, even friends I'd introduced to Sarah. Each new conversation added pieces to a puzzle that didn't make sense, or made too much sense in a way I didn't want to accept. Then came the first twist that I didn't see coming. One morning, Detective Ramirez called me to the station, her tone unusually serious. Michael, we found something in your father's office. I need you to come in immediately. My mind raced. Asterisk, what now? Asterisk, I imagined all sorts of things. A note, a will, a secret financial document. I never imagined what I actually saw. They led me into a small evidence room. On a table lay a folder of letters, handwritten, folded carefully, and addressed to Sarah, from my father. I picked one up, hands trembling. Inside were messages I never should have seen, confessions, pleas, promises, not just of love, but of fear. My father had written about secrets he thought no one knew, about debt, about a past mistake, about someone he trusted far too much. I handed it to Detective Ramirez, voice barely audible. What does this mean? She shook her head. It means there's more to this than a simple accident or a love affair. Your father knew something, and we think it might be connected to the night to his death. For the first time, I didn't just feel grief. I felt terror, because the people I thought I knew, Sarah, my dad, even my mom, none of them seemed as innocent as I believed. And if there was someone else involved, if there was some plan I hadn't seen, then maybe this nightmare was far from over. I left the station in a daze, the letters clutched in my hand. Rain was falling, the streets shiny and wet under the streetlights. My phone buzzed with messages from Sarah, one after another, pleading, apologizing, and oddly cryptic. Then came the call that made my blood run cold. Detective Ramirez had found something at my parents' house, something I hadn't even thought to look for. A safe, hidden behind a loose panel in the wall. And when she cracked it open, inside were documents that suggested my father had been hiding money. Not a little, a lot. And the withdrawals, transfers, and deposits didn't add up. Someone had been taking the money. Someone close to him. And it wasn't just Sarah. I sank into the nearest chair, heart racing, hands shaking. I wanted to scream, to run, to throw everything away. But I couldn't, because if the police were right, if the letters and the safe were part of some bigger plan, then someone had killed my father knowing more than I did. And that's when my phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, you don't know the half of it. Stop looking, or you'll be next. Asterisk. The message was short, cold, and terrifying. I dropped the phone. My hands were slick with sweat. I looked around my empty apartment and realized something I hadn't faced before. The nightmare wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Sarah had secrets. My father had secrets. And now I had a very real chance of becoming part of a list I didn't want to be on. The line between friend and enemy had disappeared. And in that moment, I understood. The truth might destroy everyone I loved, or was everyone I still had left. I knew I had to find out what really happened. But I didn't know if I'd survive the journey. And then the phone buzzed again. Another text. This time, it wasn't from an unknown number. It was from Sarah. Asterisk, meet me at the lake tonight. Alone. There's something you need to see. Asterisk. I froze. The rain outside was heavier now, pounding against the windows like the drums of some dark warning. My mind screamed at me to ignore it. Don't go. Don't do it. But something deep inside me, anger, curiosity, desperation, knew I had no choice. And as I grabbed my coat and headed toward the door, I had no idea that what I was about to discover would make that night at the kitchen floor seem like a warm-up for the horrors still to come. The drive to the lake felt endless. Rain streaked down the windshield, turning the world outside into a blur of gray and orange streetlights. Every few seconds, my phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. Sarah had said alone, and I wasn't about to call anyone. Not the police, not my mother, not even a friend. I kept replaying her message in my head. There's something you need to see. At first, I wanted to tell myself it was just more lies. Sarah had been lying for years. To me, to my father, to everyone. But a small, stubborn part of me refused to believe she would summon me into the night for nothing. There had to be a reason. When I finally arrived at the lake, the scene was eerily quiet. Mist rose off the water, curling around the trees like fingers trying to reach for me. I parked the car and stepped out, my shoes sinking slightly into the wet grass. My heart pounded as I scanned the edge of the lake, but Sarah was nowhere in sight. Then I heard a voice, soft but unmistakable. Michael. I turned. She was standing at the end of the small dock, her hair plastered to her face from the rain, coat soaked through, eyes wide. Something in her expression made my stomach twist. Not fear, not exactly. More like dread. Sarah, I called, trying to keep my voice steady. What's going on? Why here? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, and I noticed a hand shaking. One hand was clutching a small envelope, yellowed and damp from the rain. She extended it toward me. Open it, she said finally. I took it cautiously, feeling the weight of whatever was inside. My fingers trembled as I pulled out the contents, photographs, letters, and a folded piece of paper with handwriting I didn't recognize. My pulse jumped as I realized the photographs were from inside our house, recent ones. Pictures of my father at his desk, Sarah in the kitchen, and someone else. A man I didn't recognize, moving around the house late at night, shadows falling across his face so I couldn't tell who he was. I looked up at Sarah. "Who is this?" She swallowed, shaking her head. I didn't know at first. I thought it was just him, my father, but there's someone else. Someone watching us. I felt my chest tighten. I'd suspected there was another presence, a hidden hand in all of this, but seeing it laid out like this, it was terrifying. "Michael," she whispered, "my father, he wasn't the only one with secrets. And I wasn't completely honest with you. I didn't mean to hide it, but I was scared. He made me afraid, and I didn't know how else to survive." Her words were halting, fragmented, but I caught the meaning. There had been manipulation, deception, and danger I had never imagined. My father's death was just one layer of a much deeper story. I wanted to scream at her, ask her why she never told me, why she kept secrets that nearly destroyed us all. But then she stepped close again, pointing toward the water. "Look," she said. I followed her gaze and froze. Floating just beyond the dock was a small rowboat, half filled with water. Inside was a bundle of what looked like papers and something else. My stomach lurched as I realized it could be more than just documents. Before I could react, Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. "It's him," she whispered. "Who?" I asked, dread creeping into my voice. "The man in the photos. Here's he." Then I heard it, a crunching sound through the wet grass behind us. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and closing fast. "Michael, we need to go," Sarah said, grabbing my arm. But it was too late. From the mist emerged a figure, tall, dressed in dark clothing, face obscured by a hood. My mind raced. The man in the photographs. He was here, and he had been watching us. Every moment, every secret, every lie. None of it was safe. "Step away from her," the man said, voice low and chilling. I felt frozen. Not fear for myself, fear for Sarah, for the envelope, for the unknown danger we had stumbled into. Before I could respond, a sudden movement startled me. The bundle in the rowboat shifted violently. Something heavy fell into the water with a splash. I barely had time to react before the man lunged toward us. And that's when the first gunshot rang out. The gunshot echoed across the lake, bouncing off the water and the trees like some twisted announcement that our lives had just changed forever. For a moment, everything froze. The rain, the mist, even my heartbeat, which felt like it had stopped entirely. Sarah screamed. An instinct took over. I grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the trees behind the dock. Wet branches whipped against our faces as we ran blindly through the underbrush, hearts hammering, lungs burning. Somewhere behind us, the hooded man cursed, shouting something I couldn't make out over the pounding rain. I stumbled on a root and fell hard, scraping my knee. Pain shot up my leg, but I didn't have time to care. Sarah dragged me forward, and finally we reached a small path that led toward the parking lot where my car was waiting. My fingers fumbled in the wet darkness as I unlocked the doors. We jumped inside, drenched and shivering, and I gunned the engine. The tires spun on the muddy ground, sending water spraying everywhere. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but the mist swallowed any sign of our pursuit. All I could see was fog, rain, and a growing sense of dread that we weren't done yet. "Michael," Sarah said, her voice trembling. He saw the envelope. He knows about the papers. About everything." I swallowed hard. "We need to get out of here. We need to call the police. Tell them what just happened." But even as I said it, a creeping thought crawled into my mind. What if the police weren't enough? What if someone with a motive bigger than either of us was already inside the system, already manipulating the investigation? My father had secrets, and it seemed like someone else knew them too. Someone dangerous. We drove in silence for a few minutes, only the wipers beating against the windshield, until Sarah finally broke it. "Michael, I need to tell you the truth. About everything." I wanted to tell her to stop, that I couldn't handle any more lies, but something in her eyes told me I didn't have a choice. "I didn't just have an affair with your father," she whispered, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. I was forced into it. He threatened me, said he'd ruin our lives. I tried to fight it, but I was scared. And now, I think he planned something else before he died. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. What do you mean, plan something else? She shook her head. I don't know. I didn't understand it fully at first. But the letters, the money, the envelope, it's all part of something bigger. And now that man at the lake, he's connected. I know it. He's not just someone watching. He's waiting for the right moment. We drove for what felt like hours, the rain never stopping, the tension never letting up. Every shadow, every reflection on the wet asphalt made me flinch. I kept imagining the hooded man behind us, rifle gun in hand, ready to finish what he'd started. When we finally arrived at my apartment, it should have felt like safety, but the front door was ajar. Who's been here? I whispered, backing away. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. Sarah shook her head, her face pale. I don't know. I locked it. I swear I did. Inside, the apartment was a mess. Drawers pulled open, papers scattered across the floor. My laptop was missing, my phone gone. Whoever had been here wasn't just looking. They were searching. And judging by the signs, they'd been thorough. I grabbed a chair, holding it like a weapon, and moved slowly through the apartment. Every noise, a creak in the floorboards, the tap of water from the kitchen, made me jump. Then I heard it, a whisper, low and menacing. You shouldn't have come here, Michael. I spun around. Nobody, just the empty apartment, dripping rain from our coats onto the floor. Then I noticed something on the counter, a folded piece of paper, hastily placed where we'd see it. I picked it up. My hand shook as I unfolded it. Written in familiar handwriting was a single line. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. I looked at Sarah. She was frozen, staring at the note. It's him, she said. He's always been one step ahead. Your father, he knew he was dangerous. That's why he left the letters. The safe, he was trying to warn us. And then it hit me, the truth I had been ignoring. My father's death, the affair, the letters, the hidden money, it wasn't just about secrets. It was about survival. Someone had been manipulating every move, waiting for the right time to strike. I sank into the nearest chair, exhausted, drenched, terrified. And then the sound came again, from the window. A single, deliberate knock. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't seen anyone outside. The rain was still pouring, the night still black. Michael, Sarah whispered, clutching my arm. Don't open it. But before I could respond, the window slid open, and standing there, smiling in the darkness, was a man from the lake, the hooded figure. I warned you, he said, voice low, calm, deadly. Then the next thing I saw made me wish I could disappear into the floor. In his hands was the envelope, the one Sarah had shown me at the lake. The one that held everything, letters, photographs, secrets. And he wasn't alone. Behind him, emerging from the darkness, were two more figures I didn't recognize. Men, or maybe older boys, faces obscured by hoods, all moving with the same deadly precision. I realized in that moment that my father's death, Sarah's lies, the letters, the money, none of it had been random. We had walked into a trap. And it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The hooded man stepped closer, and I noticed something glinting in his hand. Before I could react, the lights went out. The darkness was suffocating. Rain still drummed on the windows, mixing with the pounding of my heart and the rapid, shallow breaths of Sarah. The apartment, once our supposed sanctuary, had transformed into a nightmare. Shadows shifted in the corners, and every sound, the creak of the floor, the distant rush of water from the storm, seemed magnified. Michael, what do we do? Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Her hands gripped mine like she was afraid we might vanish if we let go. I swallowed hard. My mind raced, trying to remember every move my father had taught me about strategy, survival, dealing with threats. But this wasn't something a lesson could fix. This was raw danger, the kind that didn't care about preparation. The hooded man stepped closer from the window. I could barely make out his outline, but I could see the way his body moved with deadly purpose. In his hands, the envelope gleamed faintly, reflecting the sporadic flashes of lightning outside. Then the other two figures emerged from the shadows behind him. They didn't speak. They didn't hesitate. Their intent was clear. They wanted the envelope, and they would take it, by force if necessary. I realized we couldn't fight them directly. Not here, not now. But maybe we could survive long enough to escape. Sarah, I whispered, we have to distract them. Follow my lead. She nodded, fear etched on her face, and I could tell she was putting her trust in me, even if only barely. I grabbed a metal lamp from the table and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the far wall with a deafening crash, sending sparks flying and drawing the attention of the intruders. In that split second, we bolted for the back door, the only other exit beside the window they had entered. The door was locked, of course, but my father's old spare key, one I had almost forgotten about, fit perfectly. We pushed the door open, cold rain instantly soaking us as we stumbled into the alley behind the building. The thunder roared overhead, masking the sounds of pursuit. I could hear them behind us, shouts muffled by the storm, boots splashing through puddles. Where are we going? Sarah gasped. I didn't have a clear answer. Anywhere safe. Just keep moving. The alley twisted and turned, dumping us onto a side street where the storm had turned the city into a near flood. I could feel the envelope weighing heavily in my coat pocket, the physical embodiment of everything that had gone wrong, everything my father had tried to protect us from, everything Sarah had been hiding. Then I saw it, headlights cutting through the rain. A car, parked with the engine running, windows fogged. Instinctively, I dragged Sarah toward it. Maybe we can use it, I muttered. We reached the car, and I quickly fumbled with the keys. Just as I was about to unlock it, a sharp voice cut through the rain. Stop right there. I froze. The hooded figures had caught up faster than I imagined. One of them pointed a gun directly at us, and my stomach dropped. My hands were shaking as I realized how close we were to death, how easily it could end. Then a flash of lightning revealed something I hadn't expected. The intruders weren't wearing masks this time. Their faces were unmistakable. One of them, the tallest, the one who had first confronted us at the lake, had the same eyes as my father. I staggered back. No, it can't be, I whispered. The man smiled, a cold, cruel smile. You've been looking for answers, Michael, he said. But some answers come too late. Sarah gasped, and I could see tears streaking her rain-soaked cheeks. It's him, my father. No, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. My father's dead. He's gone. The figure laughed, a hollow, terrifying sound that cut through the storm. Dead? Oh, he's very much alive. And so is the truth you've been trying to find. Before I could respond, another flash of lightning illuminated the alley again, and I saw movement behind them, more figures emerging from the darkness. They were carrying something, large, heavy. My heart stopped as I realized what it was, my father's body, or at least what looked like it. Michael, Sarah whispered, clutching my arm, we have to run, now. I didn't need to be told twice. We bolted through the storm-soaked streets, trying to lose him in the maze of alleyways, but every turn seemed to lead to another confrontation. My mind raced. What was happening? How could my father be alive? Were the letters, the threats, everything, part of some elaborate plan or trap? Finally, we found a small abandoned warehouse at the edge of the docks. It was dark, wet, and smelled of rust and salt water, but it was better than being out in the open. I pulled Sarah inside and barricaded the door as best I could. We collapsed against the wall, drenched, trembling, hearts racing. I tried to catch my breath, but it was useless. My mind replayed everything. The lake, the envelope, the gunshot, the apartment invasion, the storm, the confrontation outside. Every step had been a near-death experience. Then Sarah spoke, her voice low and urgent. Michael, the envelope. You haven't even looked inside yet. You need to see it. I hesitated. Everything I had seen so far, letters, photographs, threats, had almost destroyed me. But I knew she was right. The truth had to be uncovered, no matter how dangerous. I pulled the envelope from my coat, carefully opening it. Inside were letters, documents, and photographs, more than we had seen before. As I flipped through them, my stomach turned. There were detailed accounts of deals, threats, and manipulations. But then I saw something that froze my blood, a note in my father's handwriting, addressed directly to me. It read, Michael, if you are reading this, you are in danger. There are people who will stop at nothing to protect their secrets. Trust no one, not even those closest to you. Your mother is not who she seems. And Sarah, your life depends on her knowing the truth. Use this knowledge wisely, or it will cost you everything. I looked up at Sarah. Her face was pale, eyes wide. Everything we've been through, it's all connected, she whispered. Before I could respond, a loud crash shook the warehouse. Something heavy hit the metal roof, echoing like thunder, and then the next explosion of chaos came. The front door was being torn open. The sound of metal tearing against metal echoed through the warehouse like a scream. Rainwater poured through holes in the roof, mixing with a metallic tang of rust, and I could hear the intruder's boots pounding against the concrete floor. Michael, they're coming. Sarah shouted, her voice trembling. She clutched my arm like she could anchor herself to reality. I tried to think, tried to remember everything my father had ever warned me about danger. Adrenaline surged through my veins, sharpening my senses. I grabbed a length of pipe from the corner, holding it like a weapon, even though I knew it was almost useless against armed men. The first hooded figure appeared in the doorway. Rainwater dripped from his hood, his eyes glinting in the dim light. The envelope in his hand gleamed, mocking me. I felt rage and fear twist together, making me shake. "Stop right there," he said, voice low and dangerous. I tightened my grip on the pipe. "Stay back." The man laughed, a cold, hollow sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You don't understand, Michael. This isn't just about you or your little life. It's about keeping secrets alive. And your father is the one who made it all possible." I froze. My father? Alive? Or was this some cruel trick? My thoughts raced as I tried to make sense of everything. The letters, the envelope, the mysterious instructions. Before I could respond, Sarah grabbed my sleeve. "Look," she hissed. I turned and saw it, a hidden passage behind a stack of crates, just large enough for a person to squeeze through. A faint light glowed from within. My father must have left it there. A hiding place, or maybe a way out. "Go!" I shouted, grabbing Sarah's hand. We ran, slipping through the narrow passage as the intruders shouted behind us. The air inside smelled musty, damp, but at least it was quiet. We emerged into a small storage room, walls lined with shelves filled with boxes. There, in the center of the room, was a large safe. My father's handwriting was scrawled across the front. Only for Michael. The truth lies inside. I ran to it, heart hammering. The combination was written on a note tucked nearby. As the tumblers clicked into place, I felt a strange sense of anticipation mixed with dread. What secrets had my father left? What danger was hidden in these papers? The safe door creaked open. Inside were stacks of documents, photographs, and a small notebook. I grabbed the notebook and began flipping through it. What I read made my blood run cold. My father had been involved in something much bigger than I had imagined. Dangerous alliances, criminal dealings, threats against people who had crossed him. And Sarah, her involvement wasn't just about fear or manipulation. She had been forced into situations to protect me, to keep me safe. Tears pricked my eyes as I realized the depth of her sacrifice. She had lied, yes, but she had also risked everything to survive and protect me. I wanted to reach out, to hold her, to tell her I understood, but there was no time. The sound of the intruders searching for us had grown closer. Suddenly, the wall behind us exploded inward. The first hooded figure and two others burst through, weapons drawn. "Give us the envelope," the tallest one shouted. I clutched it tightly, refusing to let go. "You're not taking it," I yelled. Chaos erupted. Boxes toppled, documents scattered, and the rain from a broken roof poured in, mixing with the dust and debris. I swung the pipe wildly, hitting the nearest intruder. He stumbled but recovered quickly, pulling a knife from his coat. Sarah screamed. I grabbed her hand and dug toward a side door, but the intruders were relentless. They blocked the way, forcing us back toward the center of the room. And then I saw it, a flash of recognition in the tallest figure's eyes. It wasn't just rage, it was familiarity. My father's expression, the same sharp features, the same calculating look. My heart sank. "Michael," he said, voice low but full of menace. "You have no idea what you're holding. That envelope, it contains everything. And if you take it, everything your father built, everything he sacrificed, will be lost." I swallowed hard. I realized a horrifying truth. The man in front of me was my father. Alive, yes, but not the man I remembered. Something had changed him, twisted him, and the people with him, the other intruders, were part of the same network. Before I could process it, a sudden crash came from above. The warehouse roof groaned under the weight of something massive, and debris rained down around us. Sarah screamed as a beam fell mere inches from where we stood. I shielded her with my body, heart hammering in my chest. The intruders faltered, looking up in panic. In that split second, I made a decision. Clutching the envelope, I bolted toward a side exit I had spotted earlier, dragging Sarah with me. Rain and debris lashed against us, but we ran, desperate for survival. We burst into the storm outside, gasping, soaked, and trembling. Lightning illuminated the warehouse, revealing a shocking sight. It was engulfed in flames, smoke and fire consuming the place where our secrets had been kept. And in the middle of the inferno, I saw him, my father, standing among the flames, his expression unreadable, holding something that glowed in the firelight. Before I could react, a deafening roar shook the air. Something heavy fell from the warehouse roof, crashing dangerously close to us. The last thing I saw before darkness overtook me was my father's face, twisted in a way I couldn't understand. A mixture of regret, rage, and something darker. The storm had not relented. Rain pounded against our faces as Sarah and I stumbled through the streets, drenched and exhausted. My lungs burned from running. My muscles screamed in protest, but there was no time to rest. The warehouse fire behind us still glowed in the distance, a beacon of the chaos that had consumed everything we thought we knew. We ducked into an alley, seeking shelter behind a dumpster. My hand shook as I clutched the envelope, the weight of its contents pressing down on me more than the rain-soaked clothes ever could. I glanced at Sarah, who was trembling but alert, her eyes scanning for any sign of pursuit. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Not the chaotic rush of the intruders from before, but measured, controlled. I peered around the corner and saw him. My father. Alive, drenched, but unmistakably him. He moved with a predator's grace, scanning the area like he expected us to peer. "Michael," he called, voice cutting through the rain like a knife. "You shouldn't have run. It makes things complicated." I swallowed hard, heart hammering. Why? Dad? Why all of this? Why put Sarah in danger? His eyes flicked toward Sarah, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something human, regret. "She was never supposed to be hurt," he said softly. "But there are forces you don't understand. I did what I had to do to protect you, to protect everything we built." Everything we built. I shouted, the words tasting like acid in my mouth. "You mean the lies, the manipulation, the affair, the letters, the threats, the murders?" His jaw tightened. "I did what I thought was necessary. Some people cannot be trusted. Some secrets must be kept at any cost. And some mistakes cannot be undone." Sarah gasped. "Is the one, Michael. He knows everything. About the affair, about the envelope, about us." My mind reeled. The truth I had suspected for months, the unspoken tension, the odd behavior, it all clicked. Sarah had tried to protect me, not from strangers, but from my father. And my father had been orchestrating every step, every threat, every dangerous encounter, all to maintain control of a secret so dark that even now I could barely comprehend it. Before I could react, he lunged, not with a gun, but with a feral strength I had never seen before. My instincts kicked in, and I shoved Sarah behind me, gripping the envelope like a shield. We stumbled, sliding across the wet pavement, and the rain became a blur, drumming in my ears. And then, the final chaos. In one horrifying instant, a shot rang out. The bullet struck him in the chest. He stumbled backward, eyes wide with shock and disbelief, and collapsed into the puddle-soaked street. Rainwater mixed with blood, and the envelope slipped from my hands, landing in the mud. I froze. The world seemed to tilt, time slowing. My father, the man who had orchestrated this nightmare, who had risked everything to protect me in his twisted way, was lying there, lifeless, or at least critically wounded. Then I realized there was someone else, hidden in the shadows, holding the smoking gun. I squinted through the rain and lightning, heart hammering. It was Sarah. Her hands shook, eyes wild, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean to, she whispered. I took a step toward her, my voice low but firm. Sarah, tell me what happened. She swallowed, shaking her head. He would have destroyed us. All of us. I couldn't let him hurt you again. Or anyone else. I didn't know what else to do. I closed my eyes, my chest tight with grief and relief, anger and understanding all at once. The weight of everything, the affair, the deception, the danger, the lies, crashed down on me. But I also realized something. We were still alive. We had survived. And the truth, as twisted and painful as it was finally out. The storm began to let up, the rain slowing to a drizzle. I looked down at my father, his eyes closing for the final time, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the man he might have been. Not the schemer, not the manipulator, but a father who had made terrible choices. Sarah reached for my hand, trembling. Michael, what now? I took a deep breath, looking at the ruined street, the remnants of fire and chaos all around us. Now, I said, voice steady despite the storm still raging in my heart. We move forward. We survive. And we make sure nothing like this ever happens again. We picked up the envelope, now sodden and doted, and walked away from the destruction. Behind us, the storm cloud began to break, letting through the first pale light of dawn. It didn't erase the horrors we had faced, but it offered hope, a reminder that even in the darkest, most twisted moments, survival, love, and resilience were possible. As we disappeared into the morning mist, I realized something profound. Life was fragile, people were unpredictable, and truth was a weapon that could both destroy and save. But with kindness, courage, and empathy, even in the most impossible circumstances, we could endure. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the wet streets, I made a promise to myself. No matter the secrets, no matter the betrayals, no matter the horrors we had faced, I would live, I would forgive, and I would protect the people I loved. The nightmare was over, but the lessons it left behind would stay with us forever. Do subscribe and enjoy new crime story every single day.